So as Madison is casually prying open the cabinet with the crowbar, she sets it down to reach in to get the drugs. And everyone in the audience is screaming at her, "Pick up the crowbar!" Fear the Walking Dead, Episode 2. So close, yet so far. The Walking Dead has a trick it likes to pull out of its sleeve every so often, and sometimes it actually dictates an entire season arc, but it's scattering the survivors to the winds. And the audience is waiting every week to see, will there be the tearful reunion that it's almost like a contract that we should be promised. And you know that The Walking Dead, like another show that I might reference, Game of Thrones, loves pulling that rug out from under you and thinking, oh, you wanted these two to get back together, we're going to get them this close, and then you're not going to get what you want. So will Fear the Walking Dead take the same path? This week, it's certainly setting us up to do that. Alicia, who starts the episode still blissfully unaware of what's going on, seems more determined to bring Matt a thermos of cold soup than Laurie ever was to borrow a vehicle that she would inevitably crash into a tree. Meanwhile, Madison and Travis are going headlong into harm's way for the safety of their own children. Cue the obligatory, "Has anybody seen Carl?" So we see the principal walking through the hallways of the school. He's got his walkie-talkie, and we already know he's doomed. If he isn't at this point, he certainly will be very soon. The grounds are deserted, and it's all very eerie. And we cut to Alicia, who's still blissfully oblivious to the situation around her. She still has no idea. She's going to go see Matt, who, remember, last week didn't show up at the beach for their date, and he wasn't returning any of her texts, which, you know, in this day and age is a major crime for a boyfriend to do. So there's very little dialogue in this opening scene. It's played to build suspense, to build dread, and it's pretty effective in its task. And the last thing we see is Alicia comes around the corner, sees something on the ground. It's left to our imagination, and she screams, "Matt!" No, she just screams. Actually, she doesn't say his name. She had said, "Matt, Matt," and that's all we heard. And then she screams, and it doesn't show us what she sees. We're left to assume he's either being eaten, or he's laying there, he's dead, or maybe he's about to eat her. So we pick up right where we left off when we begin Act 1, after the little theme music and the title card, with Madison and Travis speeding away from where they saw the drug dealer Cal rising up, and they kept running him over and trying to kill him, and he wouldn't die. We pick up right there, and they're speeding away, and they're going to get home, and Travis needs to find Chris and Liza. And of course, Madison has Nick with her, and she needs to get Alicia. So they go over to Matt's house. They find Alicia at Matt's house, and Matt's not looking good. And she's just kind of dabbing his forehead, and she's refusing to leave him, but Travis is trying to explain that, you know, you've got to go. And Matt actually does the right thing. He convinces her to go with her parents. I think he knows he's a goner. If she doesn't have what he's got already, she will soon. So there's a couple good moments in this episode where, like, the neighbor is loading up his car with supplies, and he's got a cough, so you instantly know he's a goner. The cop, who we have to assume is not on duty, filling up his trunk with water and with supplies. And I'd like to see that. That would be a nice spin-off for a standalone episode, what that cop's going to do. Just follow him on his own. I know to have a police officer would be too close to another Rick Grimes, but I'm interested to see what that cop does next. We can presume he's going to go into the desert or up into the hills with his supplies and just try to wait it out. But as we find out later, this isn't going to end. So Travis goes to get his ex-wife and his son, and Liza's screaming at him about the settlement arrangement, and she's just not listening. She's not listening to the warnings. He tries to call Chris, who's on the bus. He's rejecting the call. They're being very, very, very difficult. They're not aware of the situation that's around them yet, and Travis is trying to open their eyes, but they're not ready to listen. So we have some great scenes with Nick detoxing, and he says, "You know what I'm about to go through." So Madison goes to the school to try to find him some medicine, like some Vicodin or some Percocet or something like that. She ends up finding Oxy to help him with the withdrawal symptoms. But while she's gone, there's some great scenes with Nick and his sister Alicia, where she's trying to go to see Matt, and Nick knows that she's dead if she leaves the house, so he actually fakes a seizure. And she takes good care of him. And there's a nice character moment between the two of them where he says, "I'm sorry." And she says, "I hate you." And he says, "I know." That was a great moment there, because those are real feelings between those two. So Madison's raiding the school pantry, and she runs into Tobias, who's my new favorite character, because he's the only one who's practical. And Madison says, oh no, we have food. And he's like, you better get some canned food. And they're talking about the electrical grid and the communication grid and how it's all going to fall. And in probably the best scene of the show, they run into the principal Artie. Let's just call him Principal Walker. I forget his last name, actually. I know his name's Artie. And Madison's trying to reason with him. And Tobias already knows. He got back his knife, and he already knows. So he tries to stab him in the chest. It's not working. He tries to stab him in the head. I think the knife either bends or breaks off. It's not a very strong knife. And what you really need is an ice pick. And Madison ends up using a fire extinguisher to just bash his head in. And for her now, it's all too real. She just killed her friend and her boss, someone who she, respected and worked with, presumably for years. She just killed him. So she's going to have a hard time dealing with that. A really great character moment later when she gets home and she's in the bathroom and she's washing the blood off her jacket and she's just crying, but she knows she's got to stay strong for her daughter. And Alicia, who's kind of updating her on what Nick had been up to with his withdrawal, Madison just walks right past her. She's like, Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong? It's like, well, she's not ready to explain it yet. And the scene where one neighbor's eating the other one, and Alicia's going to go run out and help, and Madison just stands in front of the door. She knows now. This is not a joke. This is not a game. So Madison kills her first walker with a fire extinguisher, and I wonder, does Hallmark make a card for that? Congratulations. You killed your first walker with a fire extinguisher. I think they should. Did they leave behind all those supplies? That's a question I had. They had a whole cart full of food. I mean, principal's dead. Go back and get the food. Load it in the car. So she drops Tobias off, and there's those kids wearing masks in the car. That's extremely creepy. Even though it's hard to trust a guy grinding up oxy, he did feign that seizure, and I think he saved his sister's life on that one. So far, Nick is the breakaway character for me so far, even though he is deeply flawed. Also enjoy that running water and that electricity while you have it, because it ain't going to last. So meanwhile, Travis goes to look for Chris at the protest. The parents see him on the TV. They know where he is. That was a nice bit, too. That they can still get information from TV, at least for right now. And he's screaming that he's part of something. He doesn't want to leave. A full riot breaks out, and with what's happened in the news lately, it definitely hits home. It's very well shot, and it's scary. It was filmed in a real visceral way, and you really felt for these characters, for their safety, because there's no rules, there's no law in a situation like that. So they end up taking refuge in this barbershop, and this kindly old gentleman reluctantly lets them in because his wife kind of says, "Why not?" And that's where they're going to hole up. And he has a quick phone call with Madison. He doesn't know when he's going to be able to get out. And he's peeking through, as the riot rages outside, he's peeking through the slats in the door. And Christopher's trying to look too. And he says, there's nothing out there that you want to see. You don't need to see anything that's out there. And Travis is just watching, and we hear the screams. And it reminds me of that episode of South Park, where they're looking at the final battle between the archangels and all the forces of the demons, and they're like, wow, this is so cool, this is so great. They don't have the budget to actually film it. And I wonder if it's, I understand that it's more effective what you don't see, what's in your head is scarier sometimes, but in this case I think we could have used a little more of the mob just to bring it home. I think here it was a little bit distracting that we didn't get to see it. So now, are they going to spend the rest of the season in the barbershop and hold up at home? Or are they going to meet up? These are questions that we have. One thing about the show so far is that the characters aren't really clicking for me as I'm doing the analysis. Thank you very much for watching, by the way. It really means a lot. While I'm doing the analysis, I'm realizing that their characters are becoming fleshed out, but I had to keep struggling to remember their names. They're just not clicking for me so far. We're not dealing with anyone with the charisma of a Rick Grimes yet, or with the crowd appeal of a Daryl Dixon. Yeah, we don't have a breakaway character yet. I like to think it's Nick, but when he cleans up his act, maybe he comes forward as a front runner. I like him so far. I think keep your eye on Tobias. There's one thing that I'm kind of hesitant to mention, but the barbershop owner's wife is listed as a recurring character, so I'm wondering if she's going to get taken out or if maybe she's just not in every episode. But yet the barbershop owner, and I'm sorry I don't remember his name because we saw him for 10 minutes, is listed as the main cast. So I thought that was very interesting. So for me, this episode was full of a lot of really dumb people doing pretty ignorant things. And keep in mind, ignorant just means you don't know something. It's not saying that they are specifically very, very stupid by default, but that's how they're being written. They don't know anything about this world. They don't know what's going on, and it makes sense. We're at the beginning of the zombie outbreak, so it does make sense. But we have Chris filming the social revolution, thinking he's part of something, man. You're not. We have Alicia absolutely determined to stay by Matt's side, and her father saying there's some kind of a crazy flu outbreak, there's something going on. She's seen the footage on her phone, she's seen the news reports, but she's going to just stay by his side, dabbing his forehead with a washcloth. We have Madison trying to reason with Principal Walker. Artie, you okay, buddy? We'll get you some help. Uh-huh. We have Liza refusing to take Travis's call. We have Christopher, again, he comes up in this little list twice, refusing to take Travis's call. And the only smart decisions this week whatsoever were stocking up now, Tobias, trying to get back his knife, Tobias, and Nick actually faking a seizure to stop his sister from going out to her absolutely inevitable death. So there were some flashes of common sense here. So I'd like to think, like I said last week, that Tobias might emerge as like a Glenn character, starts out sort of unassuming, and just absolutely develops into a complete powerhouse. That would be awesome. So in 2 weeks, we have The Dog. And we'll see if the show gives us the reunion we're hoping for. Madison and Travis, will they see each other next week? Will that be a big finale at the end of episode 6? Or will that be something that the show drags out into season 2? And they're in 2 separate groups and they never actually cross paths for quite some time. We will find out. Please leave me a comment, let me know what you think. And thanks very much for watching. We'll see you in 2 weeks for The Dog.
You can stay with us, Tobias, until this is over.
This doesn't end.